Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah.
That's the team we're talking about, Garrett. The Baltimore Ravens.
You're good at your ABCs.
At quarterback, they have Lamar.
R and S are close.
It's
So
not-
it was stuff I had to think about it.
I said we're doing alphabetical order, and I started the Cincinnati Bengals. But anyways, the Baltimore Ravens at quarterback, Lamar Jackson, Trace McSorley, Tyler Huntley.
Bengals
before Browns.
Browns, Ravens, Steelers.
Boom, shakalaka. Running back, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. And wide receiver, Marquis Brown, Rashad Bateman. We got to talk about him because he got hurt today. I took him in round 1. Sammy Watkins, Miles Boykin, Devin Duvernay, Tylen Wallace. I took him in the 4th round. And James Prochet. At tight end, Mark Andrews, Josh Oliver, who they traded for this offseason. Former second-round pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars only 2 years ago. And Nick Boyle. So
Mark Andrews in this last year.
yeah, but he'll get re-signed for sure. This offensive line is remade this year after the injured. Last year, they hurt the left side last season. It's interesting. The right side is now much older, right? They bring in Andrew Villanueva from the Steelers and Kevin Zeitler from the New York Giants. They paid Zeitler pretty good for 3 years, and they need that because Jackson was pressured 30% last year on all his throwing plays. So that offensive line is going to help him out tremendously. And Lamar Jackson obviously wasn't running back 1 overall, quarterback 1 last year, but he's still like the first quarterback ever to have back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing years, isn't he? I believe so.
I believe
you're
that's
correct because I don't think Mike Vick did it. I think he hit like 900 and then 1,000 in a different season.
A big drop from, he had a lot of touchdowns thrown, not a lot of interceptions thrown. Obviously had over 1,000 yards rushing. With this new offensive line with much better receivers now, because they obviously they went out there and tried to upgrade the receiving game drastically. Marquis Brown, former first-round pick. They went out and drafted Rashad Bateman in the first round. They signed Sammy Watkins as well. They have a bigger guy like their Miles Boykins. James Prochet's having a nice camp. They draft Tylen Wallace in the fourth round. So they went out there to increase this passing game tremendously for Lamar Jackson, who looked good in 2019. Do we think Lamar Jackson get back to that more so the 2019 form, or do we see him more so in the 2020 form here in 2021?
I mean, it's very difficult. Obviously, last year he dealt with some stuff. He went through COVID and had it, during the season there. I think that was difficult for a lot of players to go through. And then he got it again, right? So at the beginning of training camp here, he's missed, 10 days or something like that during training camp itself because he had COVID, and he said he's going to talk to team doctors, just see whether or not he wants to get
end up getting the vaccine.
End up getting the vaccine or not. But so I guess I don't know exactly where I was going with all that, but that's a difficult situation, I guess, to have to deal with this early in camp again after having dealt with it last year. But last year was a year where we thought there was going to be a regression, right? I mean, right. The 2019 years, the touchdowns were insane.
It's just not sustainable.
It wasn't sustainable. Can it happen again? I mean, sure, but I don't see it happening. I feel like the defenses in the NFL have adjusted. So I think they know how to kind of slow him down enough where he can't go buck wild. They're going to force him into some situations that he doesn't like. And namely, they're going to try to make him beat him with his arm a lot more. I mean, it's easier said than done because he's a very special athlete, but and he's going to break out sometimes. But I feel like the amount of times is just going to be narrowed. It's going to be lessened by all the defenses kind of knowing how to pin him down a little bit.
The weirdest part, not weirdest, but the most difficult part in all of this is I think the team knows that they can win games with Lamar Jackson, the athlete. Mm-hmm. But what I don't think they are as confident in, and I think that was proven by how much they invested in the line and specifically the receivers this year, is they can win regular season games, but can they win playoff games with Lamar, the athlete? I think they're believing that he needs to improve as a passer. They need more passing yards. They need more big plays down the field. They need outside the numbers stuff. They need all of that.
Right.
So it's going to come to this weird impasse where Lamar Jackson is at his best when he's being creative and making plays with his feet, but they need him to do more of this. So I don't know which part of that is going to win out. Is he still a locked and loaded top 10 asset for fantasy football at the quarterback position? Absolutely. Yep. It's whether or not he can get back into that top 3 or 4, I think is the question.
And what do they want to mold him into? Because you're right. I mean, come the playoff time, they had Tennessee, but they only scored 3 points versus Buffalo. So they weren't overly
and that's
productive.
not an
there.
Amazing defense either.
Not amazing defense at all. So we mentioned they bring in Rashad Bateman, and Rashad Bateman is somebody who we absolutely loved coming in out this year.
One more thing before we move on from Lamar. I don't know if many people know this, and I don't know how much of a factor it's going to be, but he represents himself. He does not have an agent, and he has a contract that's going to be coming up very soon.
Right.
I don't know how that gets done or kind of where that lands due to the fact that he's representing himself. But that could be a sticky situation to just keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, if he's smart, he's just like, hey, give me the same contract Josh Allen just got. Look me up.
Right. Try.
So here's the deal. Like, it's one thing when an agent is on your behalf saying these are the numbers I want, and then the team says, yeah, right. You're not nearly as good as this guy at doing this. He's not saying it to the player. He's saying it to the agent, and the agent doesn't necessarily say that back to the player, but now the player is the agent. Like, it can get sticky if those kind of negotiations.
Feelings can get hurt.
Feelings can get hurt.
Coming off,
things can happen. So I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Coming off 2019, where it's a unanimous MVP, and a team where that literally if they didn't have him would be in a very McSorley situation. So for me, it's very interesting. And like I said, they bring in Rashad Bateman to help him. They bring in Sammy Watkins, who's having an okay camp out there too, and maybe Sammy Watkins can finally be a little bit healthy. Maybe
week 1, Sammy Watkins.
Week one
every year, 50 points.
Trade him.
50 points.
Trade him after week 1.
The biggest news today: Rashad Bateman's soft tissue injury looks like a groin comes up. I mean, so he's been banged up. He had a core muscle injury there early. Now this, I don't know if they're tied together.
This unfortunately stinks like one of those. It smells like to me one of these things that they're trying to work around something that he probably needs to have one of these core muscle surgeries on, and it's gonna keep nagging, and he's gonna have the surgery. We're gonna be missing Rashad Bateman for half this year,
which tells me like I'm instantly then now moving Elijah Moore up above Rashad Bateman, because Bateman was having a great camp. He was looking good, like he's gonna be the Ravens' number 1 receiver. But I'm with you, and Matt, you've over the last 7 years doing this podcast, this situation's coming up probably about 7 times, like once a year. And you always come out like, smells fishy to me. It seems like this. And you're right almost all the time.
That's what it feels like. That's what's going to happen now again. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be one. I've just seen these kind of things roll out, and I've seen people try to like delay things and kind of, they don't have to say everything at this point of the year. Sure. And you just kind of feel the pattern kind of developing here. And that's how I see it happening. I have no idea. He could be right as rain in another week and be right back out there, but that's kind of how it feels anyway.
Yeah, so just be careful with your Rashad Bateman shares if you're trying to trade for him or whatnot. But it might be a dip that you want to buy if he goes on IR, for example. So it's going to leave us with Sammy Watkins. Marquis Brown probably is the 1-2. Obviously, Mark Andrews is probably the number 1 receiver there, but and Marquis Brown's not someone we ever loved in Dynasty. And every time that I would talk like down on Marquis Brown as a fantasy asset, people would talk like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. He's this big game. And yeah, he's a roller coaster. And he's really fast, but his hands are buttered up as he had a 15.3% drop rate last year. And this team's lack of quality wide receivers had Brown targeted the second most of the team by a large margin. I mean, he saw 45% of the team's targets. Only Devontae Adams saw more per team. And Jackson's accuracy wasn't bad last year throwing downfield, but his receivers just weren't catching the football, which does throw some upside here for Lamar Jackson as a passer, because he's not as bad as I ever thought he would be as a passer. He's getting a little bit better. So to go along with Brown's slippery fingers, the team as a whole didn't catch the football. They had 37% of the catchable balls thrown they didn't catch last year. They were thrown past 15 yards. And I knew Bateman was going to come up really big here because he had really reliable hands. He's a receiver and get open downfield. And now losing him, you're relying on a guy who has a ton of drops, who doesn't have reliable hands, and Sammy Watkins, which we just don't know what he has. So it's probably go back again to the Mark Andrews show.
Yep.
Again. And Andrews missed 2 games last year. And even that being said, some people might think Mark Andrews has a dip, but all it really was is he saw his touchdown production drop a little, and overall he was still tight end 3 on a points per game basis.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Marquis Brown, I feel like it was an indictment enough that they went out and made such a concerted effort to go get there was 3 guys that they brought in the offseason, and it's because those guys weren't producing. They're trying to eliminate I think excuses for Lamar. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to get him they're trying to bolster the offensive line. They're trying to get him the wide receivers like you had mentioned, Garrett. And all of that I think is an indictment on the guys that were there. And those stats that you just read out, they read to that as well. So they definitely Marquis Brown I feel like is an okay NFL player. He was probably overdrafted in the NFL, and maybe he would have been better in a different offense, in a different situation. But the offense that he's in, with the situation that he's in, it's a square peg round hole type of feel for me.
And they had other guys who offered upside too. I mean, Devin Duvernay was a nice little shifty prospect that offered some upside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Miles Boykin was a nice big receiver coming out of Notre Dame that we thought struggled mostly because of the quarterback change that went on midseason there. But none of them would come up and produce there for Lamar, catching footballs. Like you said, they revamped the whole room essentially, bringing in 3 new guys with basically they have 3 first-round picks there and a 4th-round pick in Tylan Wallace. And out of camp, you're hearing James Prochet is having a really nice camp, who somebody I know, Garrett, you liked a couple of years ago.
I liked him as well, yeah.
Yeah, explosive player, explosive athlete, does some good things in the return game, stuff like that too. So that's going to be the hard part is there's a lot of exciting names in this room, but week to week, who will be the one that makes the big play?
And they can't keep all these guys either.
Exactly. So it's just we thought that Rashad Bateman was going to be the stabilizing force and he was going to be the guy. And I still think he probably will be, but this is hopefully not as bad of a setback as we're thinking, but it definitely hurts. But combined with Lamar Jackson being, missing so much time and him being gone, there can't be much chemistry there built just yet.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Bateman. Obviously, I think a lot does rely on it. Right now, I love the gamble on Sammy Watkins just for the hope, because I know the natural talent for Sammy Watkins is there. It's just, can he stay healthy?
You're going to suggest gambling on Sammy Watkins?
He's back.
Yeah.
That's his boy.
You cannot quit.
It's just on his ADP and where he's going right now. I mean, and Sammy Watkins doesn't cost you much.
Rich.
Sammy. Come back to Miss Sammy.
I saw a tweet the other day from Daniel Jeremiah. I had to make sure I looked it up to make sure I got it right. But Daniel Jeremiah, and he's one of the GOATs in the industry. Like when it comes to scouting players and looking at players,
former scout.
He's a former scout. He articulates his points very well. Like I'm all about it. His first note when he talked about Ravens camp was buy all of the J.K. Dobbins shares, which seemed to be like directly at fantasy football guys, because I don't know how else you would do that.
Yeah.
He did say, he went back in the second tweet and said, for fantasy football, you want J.K. Dobbins.
And that was really encouraging to me because as a player, loved the guy. He was, as far as tape score, he was my top back in the class last year. And we saw a lot of really good things when he got the ball. It was just some limited touches overall because sharing time with Ingram and then Gus Edwards, and they don't throw the ball a ton. But if he's looking this good once again, at some point, you just got to make sure you get your playmakers the ball. And it sounds like he's looking like that guy.
Yeah, the big thing here for Dobbins is they want to get him involved in the pass game. They're showing videos out there. The team's tweeting about it as well. So if he gets involved in the pass game, look out running back one, because you mentioned that he didn't have just a lot of opportunity last year. He averaged 6 yards per carry last year for 805 yards on 134 attempts, with 152 touches for 925 total yards from scrimmage. The team, like I said, really building him up out here. We know he could do well in the passing game because he did it at Ohio State. So running back one finish is in sight, right? This is a team that we mentioned wants to protect Lamar. They want to see what else they can mold Lamar into a little bit besides just being a running quarterback. He, like Matt said, he'll still be that guy. But J.K. Dobbins looks to take a step forward. Some people thought that Gus Edwards was like a setback to Dobbins. I really don't. I know Gus averaged 5 yards per carry, but I think they'll utilize Edwards, but doesn't hurt J.K. Dobbins at all. If they get him involved in the passing game, this is a guy who averaged 6 yards per carry last year. We saw in his college tape how elusive he could be and shifty in the open field. He gets matrix-style cuts out there. J.K. Dobbins, to me, easily could take a big step forward, and we could end up seeing multiple running backs this year finished as running back ones that we thought were going to be high on running backs last year. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me with what's going on in the Colts right now. It wouldn't shock me if somehow we saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, and Antonio Gibson finish higher than Jonathan Taylor for the 2021 season.
That's bold.
It would not shock me. Now, do I think? I'm not saying I think that happens,
right?
But I think all those players I just mentioned,
all high upside for sure,
offer tremendous upside going into the season. And if you add Jonathan Taylor in the mix, that is 6 running backs, guys. Because Cam Akers is out, right? Because he'd be 7.
Right.
6 running backs from last year's class that offer running back 1 upside.
And if they hadn't screwed over James Robinson.
Oh, my Lanta. And then you add guys in there that offer this year, like guys like Najee Harris, who would be 8. Then you got the cream of the crop. You got Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb.
Zeke Elliott.
Nick Chubb. You know,
Nick Chubb's in there
twice.
He's so good, I got to say it twice.
Or Alvin Kamara. We could put him in.
Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones. I mean, we have a real. It's a true challenge this year to be that running back 1. We see it always change because of mostly opportunity, and maybe that and Joe Mixon
and injury,
and Joe Mixon and injury. But that being said, looking into this as a clean slate of non-injuries, we're looking at a situation here where there's a lot of young, talented running backs out there that are vying for only 12 spots. Christian McCaffrey to me is I think Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook are the only, and Alvin Kamara are the only locks.
and then this other one.
and Nick Chubb. And
that's the thing. Are we getting to a point at the running back position, and this will be very short-lived because the running backs turn over so quickly, but are we at a spot right now where we've got 5 guys that are elite, and then we've got 12 to 15 guys that are going to finish in a very similar range?
I think you're probably right, and that was kind of right where my mindset was, and we even saw that last year. The top 3 guys of Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and I can't think of who the third one. I can't remember who the third one. But they had finished the gap between running back 3 and running back 4 of David Montgomery was like 70 points difference. And so we saw some of that last year where there's kind of this little bit of an upper tier, and then there's a lot of really solid running backs that you're absolutely right, could finish RB6 or could finish RB13.
Right. So the difference between RB6, RB13 is basically a point a game, and it's not even going to move the needle. So who the heck cares? You got one of these guys, and that's great. And maybe it's better to shoot for one of these lower end guys because the price tag is much lower than instead of paying for one of these guys that's way up by 5, but you're really only getting a point difference.
And where's the opportunity fall in for some of these guys? Because there's tons of other running backs we didn't mention to have opportunity as well. A guy like Travis Etienne in Jacksonville might have the opportunity to flirt with some of those numbers. And these are guys that are just that we're talking about that.
And Montgomery did it last year, and we're still expecting him to be, running back 20. So
exactly, and it's not even a name. It's not even knocking David Montgomery. It's just there's so many talented running backs, but survival of the fittest.
Yep.
Right.
Back to J.K. Dobbins.
It's a war of nutrition.
It's a war of nutrition.
Get your
bananas.
Where do you think? Do you think J.K. Dobbins right now? If I said yes or no, you had to say he was finished as a running back 1 or running back 2. What are you saying? Because out of all these names mentioned, do you think J.K. Dobbins falls in this category? Because I think the injury to Rashad Bateman is going to help force this cause. It's already the number 1 rushing team, and I know you mentioned before because Lamar Jackson makes him the number 1 rushing team. I think Dobbins is one of these guys that's going to finish as a running back 1 in 2021 season. And we should do a show on this soon. Like, there's so much talent there. Who do we think are top 12 at their position that finish this year?
Yeah, we do that before the season every single year, so that'll be coming up maybe even next week. But if I had to pick today, it pains me, but I will say no.
I'm actually, I feel the same way. And I was almost going to use the same words, so thanks for stealing them.
You're welcome.
Out of my mouth. But give them back. I like you had mentioned, I think he's going to end up very close to those numbers. I just don't think he's going to get there. And it's Gus Edwards, and it's, you know what I mean? I think Gus Edwards is going to do
Lamar Jackson
just enough, and Lamar Jackson's going to be able to steal just enough long TD runs where it's like, damn it.
I'll see where I finish, because what we do is we give a list of like 18 running backs and we just average them out to see who gets out there. We put them in order. It's gonna be weird to have J.K. Dobbins, because if he's gonna do it, and like most running backs on this list, It's going to have to be because he's more involved in the PPR game. So, like, how serious are they involved by throwing the football? And by everything I'm reading out of camp so far, which, again, it's too early to concrete that right now, it looks like that's the way they want to go. And I've seen J.K. Dobbins do it. And his yards per carry and how he is with the ball in his hands, I think J.K. Dobbins right now, just not of anything, but just a gut feeling, not doing any studying yet, I think J.K. Dobbins does finish as a running back 1 for the 2021 season.